Hello, everybody. I'm John. This is JP Strategic Investments, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Patriot One Technologies CEO Peter Evans. If you're watching this video and you're new to Patriot One Technologies, I will link both their website and YouTube channel in the description of this video. But without further ado, let's jump right into the interview. All right, Peter Evans, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing very well, John. It's always great to be talking to you.
Thank you. You as well. You as well. Just going to jump right into it because this is what's on everybody's minds. The offering, investors are kind of still digesting it right now. Can you just give us any extra context, anything that you can add to kind of tell us exactly kind of what's going on, what's going through your guys' head? Just give us any kind of information that we can to help us understand what's going on.
Sure. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of trying to read the tea leaves that we don't, want our investors to kind of overly focus on. Let's kind of get to the nuts and bolts of what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. First off, as many people saw, we issued a shelf prospectus. The exchange is very conscious of ensuring that it protects investors, and they do perform a high degree of due diligence on companies like ours when we want to raise additional funds, particularly when you're publicly traded. So we raised the shelf prospectus, and that gave us elbow room if we wanted to raise up to as much as $50 million. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that we need $50 million. Doesn't mean I want to go out and immediately take in $50 million. I want to be very, very judicious about what we take in. I'm conscious of the investors who've put money into the company already, and so I don't want to over dilute if we don't need to. I also don't want to take in a lot of money and spend it like a drunken sailor, like we've seen other companies do, in the tech world, and needlessly spending money on ridiculous things. I mean, I'd rather run a very safe and sound business, which is very focused on, good operational disciplines, right? If you don't need 14 C-suite executives, why have them? It doesn't make sense for a company so we've seen others do that. In our case, we want to take in the right amount of money that allows us to continue to accelerate. We're securing more business with more customers. That's continuing to go very, very well. And we have to scale. Right? And that scaling requires more engineers to deliver some of the feature functionality, more sales folks, more customer success people to ensure those deployments go very, very well. And the second and third and fourth phases of deployment actually go well after that because the customers are so happy with the first phase. So we had decided to take in the right amount of money. And we could have taken in more money. We ended up capping out about $6.5 million. I'm pleased to say that probably about 90% of that was the institutional investors that we specifically targeted. There were some organizations in there that we're very pleased that we were able to attract to invest in us, people who believe in what we're doing. There are some other strategics that I would have liked to bring in, but we moved very quickly. In fact, much faster than they could. We open up the window and close the window very quickly because oftentimes when you open up a window for investment, there's downward pressure on the stock price, so people can get it cheaper, right? And so we did that in a very, very short window, and that, fortunately or unfortunately, allowed us to close quickly, move fast, but perhaps a little bit faster than others. That's okay. As those strategics want to come and join us in the future, right? Because they believe in what we're doing, we still have the whole 50 million of shelf out there. And if we do decide to take in money, I'm not saying we have to, I'm not saying we will, but if we do, it'll be our choice to do so. And we'll actually do it in all likelihood because this investment will fund further growth. We'll do it at a much higher stock price. Right? Which means there'll be less dilution for that incremental money we take in. So this is a way I believe of judiciously taking care of our existing investors, right? While bringing in the right amount of money for us to keep on accelerating on the path we are.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, obviously, a lot of people were pretty worried, understandably, about dilution and stuff like that. So it's good to get an explanation there. And it seems like you guys are kind of making sure you keep the shareholders in mind when you guys do that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. The shareholders have taken good care of us. My commitment is to do the very best that I can for them. Right. And, there was no doubt we were going to have to take in some money. Right. Yeah. But you do it in the right pragmatic way to run a very pragmatic and operationally sound business. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to hear also that you said 90% of the institutions that you had targeted.
90% of the funds that came in were from institutions.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. We have a very, very high percentage of retail investors who are investors in our company right now. And what we want to do over time is continue to shift that to more and more institutional investors. That will come through basically two models. One, us going out and as we raise more funding, bringing in institutions. And two, I think as I've mentioned in some of the prior investor roadshows, we're launching and have started a more specific and targeted, investor relations roadshow. Now that we can actually tell the story and validate it with quality customers behind this, those that we've announced publicly to the marketplace, and those that we can talk to some of those investors about under NDA, because they're not publicly announced, we don't have permission to announce them. We expect to attract more and more institutional investors who want to go buy large chunks of shares, right? That in turn will also start driving up the stock price. So through a mix of activities, we expect to change the shift, which I think will bode well for all investors because the institutions tend to hold on longer and they're less volatile day traders.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that sounds good. Next question I want to get into is in your most recent earnings report, you guys mentioned about 1.2 million in, I think how you put it, signed agreements pending successful pilots.
Yeah.
Can you comment at all as far as, the average length of these pilots or any context around that might help investors understand when and how this might trickle down into the backlog and things like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, John. And we need to think about kind of our financial reports in sort of three buckets. There's those customers who buy right away, right? No worries there. And they will actually buy as an upfront purchase. And then we have annual recurring maintenance. You've got another bucket of people who do these try and buy agreements. And essentially that has two benefits. That is our way of vetting and validating that somebody truly has interest in our product. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing a lot of demos for a lot of people who are just exploring and tire kicking. Don't have the time to be distracted with that. So it's our way of ensuring they're actually committed to buy, they have the budget to buy, and they have got approval to buy, right, before we even spend a lot of time on site, okay?
Makes sense.
Also is, it's also our way of making sure we can actually do what they want to do. So as part of those try and buys, they, document down what it is they need the system to do. And if we can't do it, there's no point wasting their time or ours and insulting them and, our resources. So with that in mind, we have those try and buys. Now, it used to be a lot of those try periods could be as long as 30 days. And you still run into some very large customers, they've got a big brand, maybe a little bit of a big ego. They want it for a long period of time. What we're finding though with most customers is a couple of days on site and, they've seen enough to warrant that this technology actually does what it's supposed to do. And it's fascinating to me that even with NCS4 reports, third-party reports, demonstrations, and other activities we've done, everyone wants to see the gear on their own site, right? And that's actually a good thing because we do find different sites have different logistics. So I'm sure that works, right? And so once that's occurred, then it rolls over to the contract phase. Now you get into kind of the third bucket, which is what does that contract say? I think I might have mentioned on one of our prior calls, we signed a contract with one customer. It's going to start with 4 lanes, then add 2 more lanes, then add another, I think it's 14 lanes, then add another 7 lanes. But that's going to happen over a protracted period of time.
Yeah.
So you won't see that revenue start, becoming ratable revenue right away, right at the end of the demo period. It might take a longer period of time. So all sorts of different nuances to these contracts and all sorts of different, we'll talk about the 3 buckets in terms of what does the order backlog mean.
Okay. Yeah.
That answer your question, John?
Yeah, that pretty much answers it. There was another question that I was going to ask later that kind of works into what you were saying, though.
Sure.
And we obviously know there's varying sales cycles, and it's kind of with the nature of the product a longer sales cycle than most other products. Mm-hmm. But have you at all seen after some of the recent wins you've had, some of the NCS4 verification or not verification, but the operational exercise and whatnot, have you seen the sales cycle overall kind of tend to contract or overall, or maybe with certain customers?
Yeah, definitely. Oh boy, I think since we track, you can imagine reports that show on a monthly basis the number of leads, the quality of the pipeline, things like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, since the NCS4 report came out, it's almost been a big step function. It's given a lot of validation to the technology. It's also, quite frankly, from a marketing point of view, just create a lot of awareness. NCS4 has thousands of organizations who are part of their membership, rely on them for quality insights. They hold webinars, seminars, all sorts of things. I participated in a number of those. So it's definitely increased our brand awareness for people who probably didn't even know we existed before. And so I think from a marketing pipeline generation, it's definitely helped. In terms of shortening the sales cycle, it has definitely given a lot of people more comfort. I was on the phone with one company 2-3 days ago, and their comment to us was, I now no longer need to validate the technology. NCS4 has already done that. I just need to make sure that my people are operationally sound and use, use the pilot to help us define our specific operational procedures. So it's helped in many perspectives, but it hasn't completely eliminated that pilot period.
Gotcha. That's good to hear, though. It's, I would think, one of the benefits of kind of going from the first early adopters going to, maybe the next kind of group of people, I think you've talked about that before, that would adopt the product. It almost seems like NCS4 has kind of given you, and some of the other, evaluations that you've done has given you what those early adopters kind of would later on down the road, is that, okay, it works for somebody else, it's probably going to work for me, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at, I think I've told you before, John, I'm a really big fan of Jeffrey Moore's books, Crossing the Chasm.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the early innovators, the early adopters, the mass market adopters, these sorts of things. And a lot of times those later groups, the fat part of the curve, they rely on the references and the validation from the early adopters, who are usually the technology, leaders, right? And so this helps accelerate that. So we've kind of moved faster towards that fat part of the curve. We're not there yet. Market adoption rates, still are what they are, but it's definitely helped accelerate us, right? The other thing I think that's really helped, back to, your question about shortening the sales cycle, getting more interest from others. We took a very specific approach with NCS4, and it was all about transparency. This is an early industry. There's a lot of uncertainty. People don't know what they don't know. There's no data, which people can then use to say, okay, what's my ROI? What's my performance? What's my needs for how many lanes and things like that? So we intentionally over-rotated on transparency, even if we know it was going to show a little bit of our warts, right? Because I felt that it was really, really good for the industry. An ancillary effect of that has been that many of those folks are coming to us because they're talking about Patriot One as the company to work with, because they're a partner and they're willing to show the good and the bad. They're willing to kind of expose themselves and help us be better. And so we're being seen as, partners to the industry, not vendors in the industry. And that's a huge difference. So, that transparency is working very, very well for us, and we'll see how it contrasts to anybody else.
Yeah, that's good. I think one of the other things, at least for me, and I think for investors in general, as far as the transparency, is it also allows us to see your improvements, right? If we didn't know maybe the errors or the faults that maybe the product had before, we wouldn't be able to see how much it had improved from what it was before. So
yeah,
that's a good thing.
Exactly. And, it helps us. I'm very fond of saying, our latest product we just announced, the Smart Gateway, designed by customers, built for customers, right? And that's an outcome of things like that.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's talk about that Smart Gateway for a second. There's a question I had on that. So in regards to the Smart Gateway, obviously a big announcement. It's great to see that you guys, again, are working with those customers directly to meet their checklist of what they need. I would imagine, since you're announcing this product, that you're fairly confident that you've kind of met what those customers need and you've kind of done what they want. Can you give us any insights or context as far as whether that, have you gotten any feedback directly from those customers on what they've seen from that new product? Have they seen it? And have you seen any peak or spike in interest as a result of that announcement?
Well, it's funny. We'd signed one very small contract, and the day before that, we announced Smart Gateway, and that customer, like 7:30 in the morning, is typing me an email saying, "Is this what I bought?" And we have to reassure him, yes, we haven't sold you something old, right?
Yeah.
The product is literally like hot off the shelf, right? Still coming out of the manufacturing lines and things like that. So we have not yet deployed in broad volume,
Okay.
Literally coming off the manufacturing lines right now, which is why we announced now. But we already have a number of customers lined up for shipment and deployment that'll be coming in sort of the April timeframe for those. And so, those who have seen it like what they've seen. It's check marking all the boxes for the things that they prioritize as necessary needs. But frankly, we're not standing still. I can absolutely 100% guarantee that as people start deploying it, someone's going to come to us and say, what would be really cool is if you add this to it too. And
Yeah.
again, we like our customers to inform our roadmap. Usually, what we find is if one customer asks for a new feature, many of them are looking for it. Then you go do your focus groups. You go to all those relationships that we built. We talk to all the folks. I sit on a call every Thursday with some 30 chief security officers, and we test the idea with them, and they give us all their feedback. And that becomes the next things on our roadmap. So just like the iPhone 2 didn't sit still, it became the iPhone 12, right? We're not going to sit still. But so far from what we've heard, the stadiums have said, okay, you now have all the must-have features that allow us to deploy in volume, right? And address some of the shortcomings we've seen in the staff that we've had at our stadiums.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's great to hear. Another announcement that you guys made was the Kia Georgia win, and congratulations, by the way, on that contract. Can you, one, confirm or deny whether this was the manufacturer that you had hinted at in kind of previous webinars leading to other opportunities with their suppliers? And also, can you just give us any more context around this contract win, the significance of it for the company, and things like that? Because it kind of seemed to get a little convoluted in with the earnings report and the offering and everything. All of that news came out at once. So if you could just give us a little bit of extra context around that.
Yeah, it was a busy couple of weeks for announcements, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think we were actually putting out press announcements while you're doing live webinars. And
Yes.
wait a minute,
Yeah.
this just did. So
yeah.
So yeah, it was a very busy couple of weeks. I would have kind of liked to get that announcement out maybe about 4 or 5 days earlier, but we're very pleased with the partnership that we've got with Kia right now. That is the major manufacturing plant that's based just south of Atlanta in Georgia. It's a beautiful facility. If you haven't been there, if I ever need to have any operations done or anything, I want to go there instead of the hospital. It is gorgeous. It is clean. It's fabulous. What we like about them also is they've got a very strong discipline and rigor about how they conduct business. So it was good to be kind of put through the paces by them. Interesting enough, to answer your question specifically, I was actually thinking of a different manufacturer. There's sort of 2 or 3 that were kind of in play. And I thought one of them was going to sign a lot further and we get an announcement out further. And then these guys surprised me by the pace they moved. So no, this was not the one I was thinking about earlier. But I'm very pleased that we've got this one out with Kia. So, that's good news. In terms of where I think this goes with Kia, again, they like consistency. Like they like, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. When they make a decision, they make it for their business, right? That doesn't mean that I'm all of a sudden going to be, protecting a plant in North Korea or South Korea or Vietnam or China or wherever else they manufacture. But they like to ensure continuity, particularly if, for example, their staff are moving back and forth between manufacturing locations that that are part of their supply chain, right? And other locations. So we expect the relationship to grow with them. There's nothing kind of on the immediate horizon, but it's a very healthy relationship. They've been a very, very good partner, and we expect it to grow over time.
Okay. Yeah, it was kind of interesting. You said they put you through a lot of rigorous tests, but they also moved faster than you thought. So that, to me, at least to me, that says, you kind of were exactly what they needed. So good to hear that. The next thing that I want to talk about, kind of switching gears a little bit, Raytheon. You've obviously gotten some non-dilutive funding through them. It's definitely been a big help to the company. Just kind of out of curiosity, I know their funding is through the ITB program, but can you elaborate a little bit maybe on why specifically they choose Patriot One? Because if I'm not mistaken, they kind of have the ability to choose a variety of different companies. And also, are there any other things attached to that relationships, strings attached or benefits other than just the funding itself?
Yeah, so I think part of and a lot of this happened before my time, so I'm going a little bit on secondhand, news here. But there were relationships that were formed, a number of years ago, and there were conversations around, are there potential areas of partnership, particularly with some of the things coming out of Extract, and you think of what they're doing with the Department of Defense and these kinds of areas, right? And you think of, for example, our recent announcements about Recce, the ability to do very interesting object recognition, from moving cameras. As an example, the belly of an F-16 fighter jet. So there's all sorts of areas that had some potential synergies. Again, a little bit before my time. They never really took hold, but they never really were forgotten. So there is kind of a conversation there, but at this point, there's nothing that I can point to that says, aha, we've got this strategic partnership with them that is related to the business. At this point in time, it's primarily around the non-dilutive funding. Why us versus any of the other choices they have? I think because they do see synergies of the things we do and the work we do, and the kinds of things they're interested in promoting, from their strategies around areas they want to focus on for innovation. So they do see that there's those synergies. So of course, let's invest where we think there's something that's, in the same realm that we play in, and maybe not today, but in the future, there could potentially be opportunities to translate some of that investment in innovation into things that become accretive to their business model. Not today, but we've always had those conversations on the back burner.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. The next thing I want to talk about is, we've seen a few different answers from customers about why they've chosen Patriot One over the competition. We just got the interview with Walter Gunn, where honestly, his answer to me was probably the best answer that I had ever heard about the convenience, the ease of use of the platform. But obviously in the interviews and things like that, we're only seeing a very small sample size of customers talking about why they've gone with Patriot One out of, all of the contracts that you guys are getting. Can you give us a little extra context on maybe some of the main points, the main reasons that you're hearing from customers, why they're going with you over other competitors?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. And but let me address one point first. You commented not so many case studies. We're going to change that. Our plan is once a month, keep on rolling out a new video interview case study and things like that. So people and we'll do it from different verticals, different markets, and get different perspectives on why people like us for different applications. Okay. But in terms of I think it's no surprise to the investors. I spend a lot of time on the road. I really like being out with customers. I've crawled around the concrete, fishing wires in the ground just to make sure things are perfect and pristine for our customers. That attitude and that approach is part of our company. It's part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. I really like the people we have because they care. They care about the smallest things, like there isn't a cardboard box sitting off to the side. And the customers notice that. And they notice that difference, right? We make sure that every demo is supported with an expert technologist, just in case there's any questions. And that care for the customer, they recognize we're here for the long run. We're here for 20 years, not to just sell something this quarter. And that, I think, is getting us a lot of favor and a lot of faith in what we do. So there's kind of the attitude of the company. I think from the second point of view, we've talked about this a lot. NCS4 proved this. The product works, right? It's you can count on it catching knives. You can count on it catching the things that you want it to catch, right? There's no kind of holes in the efficacy of the detection, right? And that's the number one thing, particularly with the audiences we're talking to. Chief security officers, their focus is security. Their first focus and primary focus is not get people in fast and frictionless. NCS4 is the National Center for Spectator Safety and Security, in stadiums and things, right? It's not the National Center for let's get a lot of people in fast, right? And so knowing that we started with the best security possible in mind first resonates with them. And then from there, we've wrapped around the quality of that product, a layer of intelligence where we're not just walking in and going, wow, 3,600 people an hour. We're actually walking in and saying, let's see what it looks like in your stadium, because your logistics, your environment are very different than anybody else's. We found in one stadium, we were not getting the same throughput because they had a whole bunch of stairs leading up to the entrance. That slowed people down, right? And the demographics were such that. So instead of relying just on marketing statistics. We actually go in, we do the analysis, we do the work with them, and we help them understand what is the sweet spot optimized for their stadium. That kind of knowledge and intelligence helps them design the proper business plan that they can then take to their executives and get approval, right? So, we differentiate ourselves based on, the innovation that we deliver, right? The intelligence to make sure that the business model is right, and a high degree of customer care, right? And that comes through in this kind of things we saw with NCS4 and partnerships and the transparency we delivered. So, not sure if that's exactly the answer you're looking for, John, but these are the things I'm proud of. I really like our people, and I really like our approach to making sure we're customer first.
No, that makes sense. And I can speak, and I'm pretty sure probably everybody can do this from personal experience. If you get the feeling from a business that they're trying to do everything that they can to make their product work for you and going above and beyond, it definitely makes a difference. Even if the price is higher, even if whatever, if you're seeing they're doing everything they can, I think that does make a difference, like you said. Just on one of the points that you said, I know when you made the announcement, or not the announcement, but when you posted about being at Petco Park, and you said something along those lines also of like 3,600 people per hour and whatnot. And I was kind of thinking about that, and obviously it's good news, especially because from what some of the things that we saw from the NCS4 report, it seemed that speed did kind of reduce the effectiveness of the product. But you saw in that post that you were catching knives as small as 2 inches even at that speed. Can you give us an idea though of just because we hear that number, but when you say 3,600 people an hour, is that trying to visualize walking into that stadium, what speed I'm kind of going at? Is that kind of people just going through at normal speed? Is that people kind of being metered? Can you give us extra context around that?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts there. First off, the idea is that people walk in at normal walking speed. Okay. And then, for the highest effectiveness of detection, all the way down to like the 2-inch knives and things like that, it's good to have people separated about a second apart.
Okay.
So quick math, 3,600 seconds in an hour. If people were all perfectly paced, right, at 1 a second, so everyone's like 3 foot apart or something like that, then theoretically you should be able to get to 3,600 an hour. And in some cases, we've gone into various events. I think one that I was personally at, we ran just slightly higher than 3,200 people an hour, right? In another environment with the same security settings, an event I was at, we were probably running about 1,600 people an hour. And it's almost like you have to dust off your high school calculus books and take out, get a calculus equation. F of x equals a plus b plus c plus d, right? And to say it's 3,600 people an hour, it's kind of a false statement, because what level are you detecting? Have you turned it up only to detect guns, or do you want to detect knives? Okay, now if I turn up to knives, there's a good probability you're going to get a higher false positive rate, because if someone's got a lot of clutter in their pocket that might have got ignored with guns, right, it might get hit on a knife. So now you get your false positive rates, and you say, okay, well, now I've got more people divesting, right? If someone's got to stop and divest, does that cause other people behind them to naturally stop because they're used to that for a walk-through metal detector? They don't have to, but they might. It's human nature. And so you start to take in, okay, detection rate, false positive rate, how many lanes, 10 lanes, 5 lanes, 4 lanes? Do I want to optimize for minimizing cost? Do I want to optimize for maximum throughput, right? All these things become part of the equation. In all cases, though, the one factor that is a fixed number that cannot vary is security.
Yeah.
We cannot trade off lower security to get more people through and faster. That defeats the whole purpose of technologies like ours, okay? And so, when we fix that, we find the biggest things that cause a change in the throughput are the logistics and the people. So, John, let me give you an example. We had one concert we did, and it was a reunion tour for someone like the Beach Boys. I can't remember who. And, those guys are 3 years younger than Dirt. And their crowd was about 3 years younger than Dirt also. So no matter how fast we wanted them to move, they could only move so fast. And we kind of topped out at 1,500 people an hour, okay? Flip that over to another concert that we did for the much younger demographic, much younger crowd. They wanted to get in, get the floor seats fast, and they were moving. And they weren't carrying anything. So it was like no alerts. And so the demographics, everything else being the same, the demographics of the individuals changed right? The throughput and things like that.
Gotcha.
So that's why you got to be careful of marketing claims and go into each environment and test it out.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So specifically when you are, in your kind of target market that you guys are focusing on right now, as far as stadiums, arenas, things like that, when you guys go in there and you're trying to sell the product, or when they approach you and they're trying to sell the product, as far as who is the main person making the decision, who's the main person with the final say, hey, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Are you guys working with the chief of security, the league, the team, a combination of the two, of all of those? Can you give us some extra information about that?
Yeah, my approach is always, again, back to transparency. We work with the leagues at the league level, and we keep them informed of everything we're doing, where we're going, what stadiums, who we're talking to, things like that. And they appreciate that transparency, no surprises. We make sure we're working with the teams, and we'll work at kind of the ownership level as well as we'll work at the chief security officer level. The chief security officer person of the team is probably the linchpin. Okay. They're the main recommender, and oftentimes the decision is defaulted down to them, right? But
Makes
others
sense.
others have a say. And so, no surprises at a team level, no surprises at ownership level, no surprises at a league level.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear. If you keep everybody in the loop, you're not going to run into, okay, let's go to install it. And then somebody's like, wait, I didn't.
Yeah. Or, the last thing you want is a scenario where, an owner gets very excited and says, wow, look at the great thing I can do for my fans. And then he drops it down on the chief security officer. And now he's finding himself between a rock and a hard place because he hasn't tested it. He hasn't thought through his operational model. He hasn't got the budget and these sorts of things. And he's frustrated. You don't want that key decision maker frustrated.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when he's trying to keep everybody safe.
Right.
So next question here. Earlier in the year, obviously, we got the exciting announcement that you'd been awarded a contract at the Office of the Inspector General in DC. Yeah. Great news. Obviously, this is a big win on a variety of levels, validates the product because you're obviously, in with a customer who does not want any security concerns. So it kind of validates the product in that way, but also creates opportunities for you guys. We know that obviously with the federal government, state governments, any governments, there's a lot of red tape that you guys have to go through, and it's a longer process. Now that you guys have kind of got that customer win, can we expect, or do you expect that, future contracts, at least let's say with the US federal government or specifically DC, will there be, a shorter sales cycle there because you've already kind of gone through some of that red tape, or is it kind of on a contract to contract basis?
It's really going to depend on the department and which department we're talking to. We've seen in some of the recent conversations, it's actually accelerated some of the conversations. People come to the table faster because there's been a bit of a validation and vetting by others, okay, and a trusted organization. Different organizations, though, do still have their own rigorous processes they've got to go through, their own contracting process they've got to go through. Different ones have different requirements in terms of buying off of certain government schedules or certain contracting terms and things like that, but not all of them. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. We have found, like in general, it's helped.
Yeah. But
it hasn't completely cut the red tape out of the process, and now people are just buying.
Gotcha.
Right. So we still have to go through some of that rigor.
Okay, that makes sense. As far as to switch gears a little bit, as far as future earnings reports and whatnot, can we expect any updates in those, or later on when you're changing maybe a little bit of how you're reporting things? Any information around customer mix as far as, let's say customers with 5 or more MSG lanes or 10 or more MSG lanes, or even let's say, the percentage of customers that are sports and entertainment venues versus manufacturing and et cetera. Can you give us any extra context on that maybe right now, or do you plan to give context around that later on?
It's a great question. I hadn't thought about that one, but it's a great idea. I can see us starting to do that, as well as some of the other things that people have been looking for, like forecasting on on bookings and revenues and things like that. Certainly, as we get more stability in our bookings, and we talked about the 3 kind of buckets earlier. that will be able to give us more ability to forecast revenues. Right now, we've been a little reluctant to do it. I think we talked about this on one of the last calls, and one of the investor calls, a question came in. Because if you really think about this, I've often talked about like Patriot 1 version 2.0 really started in March of last year, so 12 months ago. And then we started to see our first real revenues, our first real bookings, probably about 6 months ago. So we really only have about 2 quarters of true history under our belt.
Yeah, not a lot of data to go off of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one significant contract all of a sudden skews your numbers significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing I want to do is have all our investors get really, really excited.
Yeah.
The next quarter, you don't have the same big contract.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I want to be, true and honest and provide as much integrity to the investors and not lead them down the wrong path by the wrong assumptions. Once we start to have, 2 or 3 or 4 quarters where we're starting to say, okay, there's a very predictable trend, then I think we can, with integrity, say, this is what our forecast looks like, right?
That makes sense.
Right. And similar things when we start to see the mix. I mean, anecdotally right now, I'd probably say as I'm looking at this quarter, the middle of the quarter we're in, we're probably looking like, I want to say anecdotally, I haven't done the math, I'm thinking off the top of my head, probably in the range about 60-ish, give or take, percent of our bookings will be in the sports and stadiums area.
Okay.
And, as I've said before, our target is there. That's where we've got the perfect product market fit. The channels, the budgets, the decision makers, the referenceability, the brand, the product, all these things are coming together for that market. But while we're not aggressively targeting through our marketing activities, some other segments, they are still coming to us. Kia is a great example. That was an inbound lead that called us.
Yeah, that's a good sign. It's always great to have customers come to you instead of you have to go to customers.
Yeah.
Next question here is, as far as, well, kind of any interview or earnings call seems to have a question about this supply chain issues, right?
Yeah.
I know that you guys have mentioned before that you expect or you're confident that you're going to have kind of enough supplies, at least from the manufacturing level, for even your most aggressive estimates, I think you said. But as far as that, even if you may have, or expect to have enough supplies and things like that, have you seen any cost changes as a result of that? Or do you expect to see any cost changes just in regards to the current environment with inflation, with supply chain, things like that?
Yeah. So, getting a little more specificity in this, and by the way, all of a sudden it's gotten really dark outside of the thunderstorm. So that's why all of a sudden the camera's gone dark here. But in terms of, if I break down kind of manufacturing supply chain into 3 buckets, the first being the capacity to manufacture, enough capacity to build things.
Gotcha.
I'm very confident we got that nailed. Okay. I'm good there in terms of that capacity. In terms of the ability to get access to parts, I'd say we're very good in probably about 90% of the parts. There's a couple that we've got right now that have got longer lead times. And so we're doing a lot of creative things to work around that. Okay.
Gotcha.
But everyone's got that pressure right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Simple example of a story. I can't remember what it was, Milwaukee, Minnesota, somewhere like that. And we needed a little Ethernet switch for a demo. We could only find one in all of, I can't remember if it was Milwaukee or Minnesota, St. Paul. We could find one. All the Office Depots, all the Best Buys, we could only find one in the whole city. So yeah, there's a global supply chain issue. Right now, we're in a pretty good shape, but we've got a couple of things we've got to keep our eyes on. Okay. And then in terms of cost and inflation, there's no doubt that there's inflationary effects that are going on in the world right now. So far, it hasn't affected us significantly because most of the stuff we're using in general are off-the-shelf kind of parts and components, and they've been a little bit inflation resistant. We are seeing it with a couple of components. Do I think that forces us to have to raise our prices in the short term? Not at this time. I don't foresee that. It might in the future, but I can't really predict the future very well right now.
Gotcha. Well, at least it's good to hear that as far as right now, as far as what you're saying, it's pretty minimal.
Let's call it manageable, but we keep a tight eye on it because we're starting to see some things that are, going to have to be managed.
Gotcha. Makes sense. I mean, like you said, everybody's dealing with it. I just thought I'd ask. That is pretty much the last question that I had. But is there anything else, in relation to everything that's going on with the company now, or anything else that you would like to tell investors, this is your time to let them know.
This is the time to let them know. Well, first off, I'm going to say this in jest, but also in appreciation. I've got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's probably about 10 names. Love that these guys go to my LinkedIn account every single day and see what the news is. It's almost a little bit hilarious, but it also tells me we've got a very passionate group of investors, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Their passion is only exceeded by the passion we have of the employees right now who are doing the work. We love what we're doing, and gosh, let's have this conversation in a couple months from now. You'll know why I'm smiling. It's been a very, very good start to the year for us in many, many respects. I'm really happy with where we are and things that are going on. I thank the investors for the continued support. Look for continued good news, look for continued good results, and let's just keep doing these calls, John. I enjoy this thoroughly.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed as well. Thank you, as always, for taking the time. I'm sure, I know I appreciate it. I'm sure the investors appreciate it. Really nice to have you on the channel.
Yeah, always a pleasure, John. Call anytime, okay?
All right. Have a great day, Peter.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this interview, definitely hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Other than that, I will see you guys next time, and have a great day.